Hey everyone, Larry Walsh here, and this is Changing Channels. And as many of you know, I spend a lot of time in Europe. One of the pleasures of working at Channelnomics is we get to work with vendors around the world, and in place that I often travel to for work is Europe. It is a vibrant region. It is the second largest IT market as a region. I mean, it's hard to describe Europe as a single market, even though there is the European Union. It's not a single market. It's certainly not a single culture. I mean, there are a number of there's dozens of countries, multiple languages, multiple country cultures, as well as a multiple levels of economic activity and opportunity. And this is something that American vendors don't typically get or adapt to easily. They don't fully understand the dynamic nature and the variable nature of the European market. In fact, in Europe, when it comes to working with distribution, there's a saying that the further east you go, the more you need distribution. Well, it's true, but it's not just east, it's north, it's south. Uh, Everywhere you look in Europe, you need distribution to help you navigate the local landscape, the local economies, and the local culture. And I say that in a period where distribution in Europe is going through a period of consolidation. You have large distributors picking up smaller distributors. You have mid-tier distributors looking for what their next opportunity is going to be, and you have smaller, more local and regional distributors that are trying to find their way forward. Understanding all these complexities, all this dynamicism, it takes a lot of insights, and the place to get that is directly from the distributors. So I've invited my good friend Alex Cattani, the CEO of Esprinet Group, one of the largest companies in Italy, as well as one of the largest distributors, particularly serving Europe, but specifically serving Spain, Portugal, Italy, in the Mediterranean Rim. Fascinating man, has a lot to say about the state of distribution in Europe and where it's going. So let's get on to our conversation with Alex Cattani of Esprinet. Let's get into it. So with that, welcome to Changing Channels, Alex Cattani.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Alex coming to us all the way from Milan. So
Yes.
so we're here to talk fashion and no. How are things in Milan?
Well, everything fine. We're living a pretty warm October here.
Yeah.
And
Aren't we all? I think that's a global phenomenon. There might be a phrase for something about that. I'm not quite sure.
I guess so, yes, yes. But it's true. It's truly much warmer than when I was young here in Milan.
Well, you are the lead. You are the person in charge of one of the largest companies in Italy, and also one of the largest distributors servicing the European market, specifically in Italy, Spain, Portugal, the Mediterranean Rim. I mean, you have a sizable footprint. There's a lot that's going on in distribution in Europe. But before we dive into that, I am curious to get your perspective on the economic climate in Europe because it's you have varying degrees of economic growth across different countries. Interest rates are still inflation rates and interest rates are still at levels that are above normal. And you also have a lot of external influencers on what people are perceiving their economies and acting in their economies on. So tell us a little bit about how you see things in the economic climate in Europe.
Well, Europe, although getting more and more sort of united, it is still a collection of separate states, and each of them still retains quite a difference against the others in terms of the dynamics. If I think of Germany, for instance, historically they have been very reliant on their mechanical sector, cars and other stuff like that. So it's quite a mixed combination, but all in all, I think we have witnessed, of course, as a whole economy, all of Europe, some tough times. Things seems to get better on certain areas. Inflation is definitely way down. Interest rates are going down as well. we still have adjustments to make, because we have not across the board adjusted in time to the new sources of wealth and growth, which are mostly around the tech. And Europe still lags behind the US and China in tech. And we do have a major demographic issue, which long term will be a problem, even more so in a continent where social security has been for the last 60 years something which got ingrained in everybody's way of seeing life and expecting governments to do things. And so those are the big challenges. But I come from Italy. Italy, after the euro, went through a major crisis because we could no longer devaluate our currency. And it was a sort of Darwinian effect with companies that had to improve. Some died, but lots of them grew stronger. And we developed, for instance, fashion or food or even cars, high-level cars, as new industries where we have a lead. And so I'm positive about the European economy as a whole. Of course, we'll have to go through major changes, and we are going through changes.
Yeah, so and it's interesting you say it like that, going through changes, because one of the things that I follow is demographics and the impact and the influence it has on the tech market. And Italy is one of the countries, actually one of the leading countries in the world for declining birth rates.
Yeah.
Two of your other major markets are going through the same thing, Spain and Portugal. They're both in declining birth rates. Europe's biggest economy, Germany, is also, surprisingly, if it was just to their native birth rate, they'd be in decline, but they also have a strong immigration because of the jobs that they have there. But it's not just that. Europe is also very diverse in its economies. The economy in Italy is much different than the economy in Spain and the economy in France. What are you doing to adapt to all these changing market conditions? What's Esprinet doing to insulate itself from disruption, but as well as position itself for what's to come next?
Well, think of the of the US. If you think of Minnesota, California, New York, Louisiana, they all have different economies, different cultures to a certain extent. You share the same basic laws, the same language. We are more or less in the same situation. Biggest difference is that the languages are different. Culturally, we have more differences. But the core, the foundation of the economy and the laws are more and more the same. There's not such a clear perception in the US that most of the laws that are adopted by each country are basically the translation into local laws of directives, as they're called, made up in Brussels. So the landscape from a regulatory framework standpoint is pretty much the same. So we mostly have to adapt to cultural issues and to the way the economy is shaped. For instance, we are very strong in Italy and in Spain. And if I look at the relative weight of government spending on total IT spending in countries, Spain is more weighted on government spending than Italy. And if I look at SME or corporate spending against the consumer, again, Italy has a lot of SMEs, whilst Spain is more reliant on consumers. So we simply have, simply in brackets, to adjust our go-to-market, knowing that in Spain we have to serve more retailers and more large corporate resellers in that government projects. In Italy, we need to be able to address a large number of small resellers that are addressing millions of SMEs. But apart from the mix, the building blocks of the strategy are essentially the same. And I guess Ingram, TD SYNNEX, and the other large American players in the US are probably doing the same. the building blocks are the same, but obviously they will, I think, adapt their strategy to California or Minnesota or I don't know, Florida.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like if you're thinking about Minnesota, you're thinking about it more than I am. So,
Well, I
but
know Minnesota exists.
yeah, yes, so do I. So,
Yeah, I guess so.
but it's interesting again because another thing, let's take this from an American perspective, because we as Americans, yes, we do have a very diverse economy. Is that the economies in the Midwest are different than the economies in the Northeast, in the Southeast, etc. Um, but we also tend to think of ourselves as homogenistic, our common language, our common currency, our common laws. When we look at Europe, we kind of think about it somewhat the same way, is that the European Union is supposed to be this unifying force. But it's not, it doesn't actually work that way in practice. And when you talk about SMEs in Italy and consumer in Spain and SMBs in Portugal, that creates a different need for both vendors, partners, and the distributors that service them. Can you talk a little bit about how those varying needs and varying economies changes the way that you work with companies?
Well, first and foremost, we are forced in brackets to have our local legal entities to have a degree of autonomy, which probably is higher than the one that you might expect. The marketing programs are similar in the general framework, but are adapted to the needs of the market. For instance, there's certain services that we provide to retailers in Italy and Spain about the management of accessories. In Italy, retailers want people to go physically in their stores and put the accessories on shelves. In Spain, most of the customers prefer to receive the goods and then use their own people. And so we have the same system, the same service we call OK Retail for this category management, but it's adapted. So basically, the key word would be localization and autonomy. There's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. Again, the foundation is basically the same, but you really have to adapt to the methodology. Think of government. In Italy, there's a major central purchase entity based out of Rome called Consip. You win a tender there, and you are guaranteed to serve all the government institutions across all of Italy. Spain is a federal system. So you need to win in Catalonia, so in Barcelona, in Madrid, in Valencia, in Seville, and wherever. And so we have way more salespeople on the territory in Spain than those that we have in Italy for government, because mostly in Italy, you need 2-3 good people in Rome, and that's it. In Spain, you need to have people across all the regions. Those are the adjustments that you have to make. And luckily, across Europe, normally European distries normally have an advantage, because we know that you need to speak the local language and know the local flavor of customers and users, vendors, behaviors. Most of the Americans tend to think of a one-size-fits-all strategy, and very often an American one-size-fits-all way of doing things.
So what do you mean by that? An American one size fits all, extra large?
Yeah, in a sense, you're right. But take, for example, most of the programs that we see from vendors in this case are taught with sizes of resellers that are simply not applicable to many regions of Europe, because there's so few large corporates across Europe or in each given nation, that there are not so many large players. In Italy, a large system integrator is a 100 million euro company. That would
Hmm.
be considered a very large system integrator. There's just 3-4 names that are 400, around 400. And an average American system integrator is probably a few $100 million.
Yeah.
That's the big difference. You need to adapt to the local scale.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that is one of the things that we, Channelnomics, when we're working with vendors on developing channel programs and implementing whatever we perceive or whether they perceive to be requirements, that they're going to, when they build their gives to gets, we'll give you this if you do this for us. And you're right, it's a real challenge, because I remember one time I was interviewing a partner in a reseller in Ireland. It's in Wexford or something. And she was begging me. She goes, please, please, please don't set the thresholds too high. And I'm like, what? Okay, tell me more. And she's like going, Ireland's GDP is smaller than Birmingham. And I'm like going, that's good to know. That's a good consideration. Is that scale does matter. The local TAM matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's very often is not fully understood by vendors. The other thing that very often happens is, although the basic framework in terms of our laws is the same across Europe, there are small differences, but the laws in Europe are different from the laws in the US. Take the Anti-Corruption Act or anti-bribery, or even more so the let's say the GDPR, the Data Protection Act, privacy.
Mhm.
Laws are way different, and very often vendors come to us with requests that we said they're not applicable, they're against the law, or okay, we take your contract, but be informed that some of these clauses you have in the contract, they will not be applicable in court. They are against the law, so we sign them, but if challenged in front of a judge, the judge will say it's against the law, so it's as if
Yeah.
they don't exist, and they don't understand sometimes. So it's
Yeah, so there was a famous American politician. His name was Tip O'Neill, from my home state of Massachusetts, and he was the Speaker of the House under Ronald Reagan. And he coined a phrase which is true: is that all politics is local. And in Europe, and I spend a lot of time in Europe working with vendors and distributors, and I can tell you is that my experience has been is that the channel in Europe is exceedingly local. That last year I had the opportunity to go to Poland and work there with some vendors and distributors, and listening to them talk about their market was extraordinarily different than listening, the conversations you and I have about the Mediterranean market. It's extraordinary how much the business climate changes from region to region. And I say that when the European distribution segment is going through a period of consolidation, is that you have both the American distributors that operate in Europe on a very large scale trying to press their advantage. You have the European large distributors that are trying to expand and consolidate. And you have smaller distributors that are also playing, in my opinion, play a vital role in that local level that are under a lot of pressure. What are your thoughts on distribution consolidation in Europe?
Well, it's a fact that it's happening. You see a number of brands above my head.
Yeah.
We would probably have to think of a distinction between what is value distribution, value add distribution, and volume distribution. In volume distribution, which we run under the Esprinet brand, it's 75% of our total revenues, so more than 3 billion and less than 50% of our total profitability. Consolidation is a fact. The smaller players are more and more under pressure. We have been acquiring a number of those players in the last years, and it's a fact that over there, I think critical mass will make the difference, because it's a cost game. So it's all about efficiency, scale of your logistic capabilities, your credit worthiness. So over there, I think we'll end up having very few large players, and perhaps some niche ones in the emerging volume areas in some niches of consumer electronics. If I think of a value-add distribution, that's a different story. Here, distributors are tasked by vendors to do things that are not simply logistics and credit. We need to provide training, recruitment, demand generation, pre-sales support, sometimes technical support. And over there, it's all a matter of competence. So you're right, smaller but more agile and smart players can play a role. It is true on the other side that digitalization is growing, and in value-add distribution, platforms are getting more and more complex and in need, and you need the size to develop and run efficiently, I don't know, cloud provisioning platforms. So there will be consolidation there as well. And the last but not least, especially the Western vendors, American vendors, have this size issue, and I think that large is good and multinational is good, which is sometimes true, but not necessarily always so. In certain countries, local players, and in many countries, I would say, are way better than the big American players, simply because they got to have the largest scale in country, and they are able to attract and retain the best talent. And so sometimes we see American vendors favoring the American large players, and sometimes they discover later on that they made a mistake, and they turn back to local European distributors. In the end, it's not American or European, it's who's the best one in that specific region or in that specific market. And typically on the volume distribution is the biggest one. In value-add distribution is the one with the highest level of competence, of talent, and of digital tools.
Yeah. And like, and I'm glad you said it like that, because one of the factors that many people perceive as driving this consolidation wave in European distribution is that digital transformation of distribution. My perspective, again, is that in the work that we've done, is that the vendors underestimate and undervalue the investments that distributors around the world, but particularly in Europe, have made in their digital capabilities, in developing cloud management platforms, automated ordering platforms, digital and data analytics, etc. They perceive that the only way that the distributors are going to survive, particularly in a diverse market like Europe, is if they consolidate, because they don't have the resources to invest. Well, I can tell you, you and I've had this conversation before. Many of the distributors have, large and small, have made investments in these capabilities. But how important is that, and how much of an influence is that having on consolidation?
Well, again, I think it's mostly a vendor perspective. If I think of our numbers, last year, 4 billion total revenues, of which 1 billion value-add distribution. Within that billion, software cloud, and we are the largest in the region, is probably 20%, 25%, and growing. And we have an internal software house 37 developers, and 3 of them are full-time dedicated to maintaining the digital cloud provisioning platform that we built a few years ago, and through which we were able to serve the reseller ecosystem with a host of software and cloud solutions. It works well. It's an investment, yes, but 3 people plus some other stuff. Again, it's I think it's overhyped. It's not so much the quantity, it's the quality. We were able to develop this platform because we acquired the largest and best software distributor in Spain, and they had a number, not many people, that were really bright guys who know everything about software and cloud distribution. And we copied their know-how, and it's now incorporated into our IT systems. It took 1 year, and now it's working fine. Again, it's not the size, it's the quality. It's not having a bigger hammer to hit on the nail. It's to have the right hammer, but somebody who knows how to hit the nail, and not the finger. That's what I would say. With a bigger hammer, you hit the nail, but perhaps you hit the finger as well.
Yeah, it not the most, it can be effective, but not efficient.
Exactly. And again, here we are talking about a keyword that everybody forgets, and it's speed. Things are changing fast, and size is the enemy of speed. You need to be nimble, you need to be agile, you need to have the right level of competence. So more than having billions, of course, you need to have a certain size. We have roughly 30% market share in solutions in value-added distribution in Southern Europe. So we have size more than 1 billion, 600 people in that area. We are a very big player. So size is granted. If we had 5%, it would be a problem. But once you're there, you win or lose if you convince vendors that you are helping them to address the niches that they are not able to see by themselves, which is the emerging market, the emerging areas when they launch new technologies, or the SME market. Everybody knows where the large government deals are or the large corporate deals are. I know the big names of the US economy, as everybody in the world, and probably you could mention 2, 3 large or even more large American, European multinationals. It's the millions of SMEs that are the backbone of the European economy, and to reach those names means providing value for vendors. And it's not size, it's your capabilities that bring that treasure in the right in the right pockets, the vendor pockets.
Yep. So let's close on that, because I think it's important. I think that we've talked a lot about the differences in the European market, the need for more diversity in distribution capabilities and coverage, how many vendors, and call it out, American vendors in particular, don't fully understand or appreciate the differences of operating in the European theater. So what advice would you give to, make it anyone, but what advice would you give to them to, operating in the European market with distribution? How should they approach it, and how do they get it right?
Well, I would suggest that they don't think that that what is good necessarily in the US is good everywhere in the world. The world is different. Size, as we discussed, size of the customers is different. Fewer large corporations. The laws are different. Cultures are different. So I would suggest don't think global, think local. Think global, but with an adaptation. Be ready to embrace the local flavor. and not only Europe, I think other regions of the world. I think Far East is even worse in this sense. And look to who is strong in the region in terms, of course, minimum size is of paramount importance, but who's strong in terms of competence. And somewhere the local subsidiaries of American multinationals are the strongest players. Somewhere else, local players are stronger. So be flexible in this.
Sound advice. Alex Cattani, the CEO of Esprinet, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you joining us here on Changing Channels.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for your time.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this episode of Changing Channels. Again, I want to thank my guest, Alex Cattani, the CEO of Esprinet, for joining us here. And I want to thank all of you for joining us in Changing Channels. It's our pleasure to be able to provide you with the information that we do. I encourage you, please keep coming back to Changing Channels, hit like, hit subscribe, tell your friends, and also check out the other podcasts we have in the margins and the network effect. Great information in all those as well. And I always say it, go to channelnomics.com. You want great insights on best practices and channel trends? We have it there for you. Until next time, I'm Larry Walsh.